نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم وبعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا ومولانا محمد وبارك وسلم وقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تهنوا ولا تحزنوا وأنتم الأعلون إن كنتم مؤمنين صدق الله العلي العظيم. My dear respected Mufti Umar Daya, my dear respected Maulana Taslim, Imam of this Jamaat, my dear respected Elder Imam, Imam Ayubullah Chan, Chairman of the Regency of Ashura, my dear respected brothers and sisters and elders, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. May the peace and blessings of Almighty Allah be with us all. Alhamdulillah, whenever occasions like this arise, it is a good time for us to get reminders. And as Mufti Sahab has rightly said at his closing, reminder for ourselves first. So it is a good time for us to remind ourselves, especially of the events of the different months, because for every of the Islamic month of the Islamic calendar, there are special, significant events that took place for us to improve ourselves, for us to improve Deen, and for Deen itself to improve in our lives. So Alhamdulillah, some of the events that took place on this day of Ashura are so significant in our daily lives today, and it is something for us to recognize and take cognizance of. Whenever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to teach an ummah or the society or to teach us, He tested the Anbiya Ikram. He tested the Anbiya Ikram, the prophets. And who was tested more than the Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Tested in the sense that for us to learn a lesson, so that we would learn a lesson. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested all the Anbiya Ikram coming down, straight down to Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And some of the events, some of the tests that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave to the Anbiya Ikram, they were, I wouldn't say harsh, but they were in such a manner that we will learn something from it. And this is all in the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when we look at Prophet Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Holy Quran, وَإِذْ نَجَّيْنَاكُمْ مِنْ آلِ فِرْعَوْنَ يَسُومُونَكُمْ سُوءَ الْعَذَابِ يُذَبِّحُونَ أَبْنَاءَكُمْ وَيَسْتَحْيُونَ نِسَاءَكُمْ وَفِي ذَلِكُمْ بَلَاءٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ عَظِيمٌ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He reminds us in the Holy Quran, and He mentions about Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, and how Musa alayhi salatu wasalam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused him to lead the people of Bani Israel from the atrocities of the Fir'aun. From the atrocities of Fir'aun and the people of Fir'aun. And he mentions in this ayah of Quran where he reminded the Ummah or the Bani Israel of the atrocities. The people of Fir'aun, they were killing your sons, they were taking your women. And this indeed, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, is a severe test. It was a test. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested the people of Bani Israel. He tested the people of Bani Israel, and He also granted them relief on this day of Ashura. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused Musa alayhi salatu wasalam to strike the Red Sea, for it to part, and for the Bani Israel to escape the Pharaoh. And where did they go? They went to the land of Palestine. So they fled Egypt and they went to the land of Palestine. And we see what is taking place in Palestine right now. The situation in Palestine is something for us to recognize, for us to hold close to our hearts. You know, our brothers and sisters are in pain, our brothers and sisters are in trouble, and it should concern us. And it should concern us and cause a concern in our hearts. So we continue to make dua on behalf of the people of Gaza, of the people of Palestine, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant them victory. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Holy Quran, وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنْتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, do not falter and do not grieve. Do not falter and do not grieve. You will have the upper hand one day. You will have the upper hand one day if you are true believers. So once we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take us out of hardship, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take us out of hardship eventually. Allah tells us in the Holy Quran, فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا إِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. After hardship there is ease. So after hardship there comes relief, my dear respected brothers and sisters. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will relieve us. And when we look at Prophet Ayub, one of the tests of Prophet Ayub was this disease that he was affected by, and everybody shunned him. Everybody shunned him. Nobody didn't want to be around him. His children, his family, his relatives, his friends, they all, they left him and he was all alone, and the only person stood up with him was his wife. And she too eventually became despondent. She too eventually, failed in recognizing the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that help will come one day. And on this day of Ashura, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him his dua. Allah mentions in the Holy Quran about this. وَعَيُّوبَ إِذْ نَادَى رَبَّهُ أَنِّي مَسَّنِّيَ الضُّرُّ وَأَنْتَ أَرْحَمُ الرَّاحِمِينَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions about this, about Prophet Ayub and the test of Prophet Ayub. When Prophet Ayub alayhi salatu wasalam called out to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Ya Allah, I have been afflicted with adversity. I have been inflicted with adversity. But he didn't stop there. He said, Wa anta arhamur rahimin. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is anta arhamur rahimin, the most merciful of those who show mercy. So he still had hope that relief would come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he kept steadfast on this hope in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And on this day of Ashura, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted him relief and accepted his dua. When we look at Prophet Yunus, when he was swallowed up by the whale, and he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we all know this dua, we always make this zikr. The zikr karima. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin. That he made dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ya Allah, I know that you are one. Ya Allah, I know that you are one. La ilaha illa anta subhanaka inni kuntu minaz zalimin. And exalted is your name. Exalted is your name. And I am of the wrongdoers. And this is how we go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we go with so much guilt. Because we are sinners, we make mistakes. We go to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with so much guilt. And face Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our guilt and beg Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for relief. Because He gave us this assurance. He gave us this assurance. Antumul a'lawna in kuntum mu'minin. You will have the upper hand one day if you are true believers. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us this in the Holy Quran. So let us not falter in the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take us out of despair. We are tested. We are tested each and every day, my dear respected brothers and sisters. We are tested by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala each and every day for the purpose that we would learn lessons and for Allah to subhanahu wa ta'ala to know that we are steadfast. That we are steadfast on His way and that He will take us out of difficulty. And this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what we're supposed to be doing. Whenever something happens to us, we complain. We are human, we complain. And we complain to each other. Life is hard. I have this condition. And when, we really do take stuff, there are somebody who is worse off than I am. There's always someone who is worse off than you are. We don't have all the problems in the world, my dear respected brothers and sisters. And this is something that we have to recognize. There's always someone worse off. And we have to remain steadfast. Remain steadfast in the hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us victory out of despair. And if we do like this, my dear respected brothers and sisters, we would be on this right path. We would be on a path that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So let us try. And what is the day of Ashura without mentioning the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and the Battle of Karbala? There's lessons in this as well. There's a lesson in the Battle of Karbala and in the tragedy of Karbala and in the martyrdom of Imam Hussain. There's a lesson in this for all of us, especially as a Jamaat, as an Ummah. We will be betrayed. We will be betrayed by each other. But we have to hold fast to what is right, stand for justice, do not falter, do not grieve. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open a way one day. And it is a reminder for us, about Abraha. When we look at Abraha, and he built a shrine, and he was luring people away from the Kaaba and to his shrine. And this shrine was built with marble and rubies and all sorts of precious gems. And he was luring people away from the Jamaat, from the Kaaba, to go and worship in this shrine. And he came with an army of elephants to destroy the Kaaba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us about this in Surah Al-Fil. And He warns us about this in Surah Al-Fil. Have you not seen how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dealt with the army of elephants? The army of elephants that came to destroy the Kaaba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala caused them to sink right there before the Kaaba. So when we try to destroy Jamaats, or we try to destroy, something that is good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He recognized this, my dear respected brothers and sisters. He recognized this. And these traits are the traits of Abraham. When we do like this, my dear respected brothers and sisters, and we follow in the footsteps of Abraham, we follow, the bigger picture is that we follow in the footsteps of the shaitan. Footsteps of the shaitan, when he was commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bow before Adam, the shaitan said, I am better than he. So, and this is how we are today. My idea is better than his. We could do this better. I can do this better. And this is how we live our lives, my dear respected brothers and sisters. We compete with each other for what? So we have to recognize all of these lessons, the lessons of relief, when we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the honor of relief, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant us relief, and the lesson of the tragedy of Karbala, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us, stand up for what is right, self-sacrifice, do what is right. You know, in this battle of Karbala, the family of Imam Hussein, they were martyred, right? He had his baby, his little baby went to the water hole to give the baby water, and the baby was shot. Baby was shot with an arrow, and as the incident occurred, the arrow went through and through his neck. And these were the atrocities that they faced, my dear respected brothers and sisters. But we are not facing this. We are not facing this. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made deen very easy for us to follow on this side of the world. And we falter. We falter and we make mistakes. We fail. So we have to recognize our purpose in this life. Recognize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created us for His worship. And for us to be thankful and grateful to Him, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, when you are thankful, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase His favors. He will increase it. Whatever you are thankful for, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase it. So let us try, my dear respected brothers and sisters, to be grateful for the mercies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, stay in unity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the understanding of the lessons of the day of Ashura, especially the lesson of relief. فَإِنَّ مَعَ الْعُسْرِ يُسْرًا. After hardship there is ease. Don't lose hope in the mercies of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause us all to die in a state of iman. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.